The following video will contain spoilers for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Miguel was right. Let me explain. How often do you see yourself agreeing with the villain in a movie? Sure, their methods might be extreme, but we can understand why they think the way they do, or what their true intentions are. The way I see it, Miguel's philosophy can be broken up into two main ideas. The first one being that sometimes it's worth sacrificing one to save multiple. A concept that fans of superhero movies are all too familiar with. Just a few years back, we saw Thanos share a nearly identical belief. But it's the second half of Miguel's philosophy that stands out to me, especially when looking at the world around us. It serves as a warning to everyone, because it directly conflicts with the way our society seems to be heading. What is Miguel's warning to us? And can we do anything about it before it's too late? It's always great to see what's going on in a villain's head, since it gives the audience the opportunity to humanize, sympathize, and sometimes even relate to the villain. Into the Spider-Verse did a good job at this, showing the tragic motivation of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, a broken man who's longing for his lost family. And Across the Spider-Verse really ups the ante. Although there's a few different villains present throughout the movie, in this video I want to focus on the motivation of just one, Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. In order to understand his motivation, we need to understand the man. As with your standard villain, Miguel's backstory is full of tragedy. He faces the usual conflict and loss that Spider-Man faces, but eventually, Miguel stumbles upon an alternate universe where his family is still alive and his alternate self is not. He makes the very human decision to take his place and live out the rest of his life with his family. Unfortunately, he comes to learn that his selfish actions cause the universe to collapse. Sure enough, this means that the family he longed for, the family he thought he got back, disappears along with the rest of that universe. Scarred by everything that's happened, Miguel goes on to create and lead the Spider Society, a designated coalition of Spider-Man variants that are responsible for ensuring that the various anomalies are returned to their correct universes, all with the hope of preventing more universe-ending events. And this leads us to his philosophy, where he focuses on the concept of in the context of the movie, a canon event is a key moment in Spider-Man's life that has to happen as part of his story and journey as a character. This often ends up being a tragic moment in Spider-Man's life, like an uncle dying during the early stages of their superhero journey. One of the key messages driven home here is that these tragedies have to happen in order for Spider-Man's journey to continue. But so far, we've only spoken about canon events when it comes to Spider-Man. What about when it comes to you? This concept might bother some of you, so to try and make Miguel's philosophy a bit more palatable, I'll rephrase his explanation of canon events. Ultimately, it boils down to the idea that adversity and difficult times are necessary for growth as a hero. Some of you watching this video might immediately want to argue with me and say something like, wow, so I'm supposed to be happy my uncle is no longer with us because it's my canon event? That's not what I'm saying at all. Obviously, these are tragic events that nobody should have to endure. But what I am saying is that no matter how you want to spin it, adversity presents you with an opportunity to grow and overcome it, or even to fall and rise from the ashes. It's an extremely unfair yet necessary part of life, and we all experience it in different ways. I'm reminded of a post I saw that goes something like this. There's an old story about two boys who had a father who was an alcoholic. They grew into young men. One son became an alcoholic. "What choice do I have?" he said. "My father is an alcoholic." The other son never touched a drop of alcohol. "How could I?" he said. "Look what it did to my father." When presented with the same tragedy, one brother seized his opportunity to grow and become better than his father, while the other fell victim to him. And the uncomfortable truth is that the alcoholic son would be completely justified in blaming his father for becoming just like him. As mentioned earlier, adversity merely presents this opportunity. That doesn't mean that everyone can or will take it. These two things can be true at the same time. But what I loathed seeing was the comment section of this post. If I can find the original comment, I'll put it up here, but one of the top comments read something like this. Not pictured here is that Brother 1 had access to the best mental health professionals, in addition to other resources that Brother 2 could not afford. What you saw here was a post teaching people about perspective, about pulling the right lessons from terrible situations. But instead you get a comment section completely overrun by this fake nuance that has to be made up out of nowhere. As humans, we naturally have a strong inclination to avoid negative feelings, but nowadays it feels like we ignore the reason we have them in the first place. Not only do a lot of us just ignore our negative feelings by not acknowledging and processing them, but a lot of people will actively try and suppress them by use of pharmaceuticals, booze, adult content, the list goes on and on. It seems as though we as a society have completely downplayed the benefits of adversity in an effort to make everyone happy. And I can't help but notice how we also manipulate language to make ourselves feel better. There's no such thing as being an antisocial loser when you can just hide under the guise of being an introvert, or no longer being considered obese when you can just say you're plus sized. But it's impossible to avoid difficult times, and I think deep down, most people know this. What you end up with is a generation of people unable to function past the slightest inconvenience. A generation where quote unquote negative words are a thing of the past, and everyone's overly medicated so they don't have to truly think about or feel any negative experience ever again. In other words, you end up with a society that's unable to grow and progress, where people are unable to pull any valuable lessons from this necessary adversity, or in other words, a canon event. By now you've probably seen plenty of memes surrounding the concept of canon events, and while a lot of them are really funny, there's definitely a level of truth to them too. But let's circle back to how this philosophy applies to Miles. Towards the end of the movie, Miles gets teleported to the wrong universe, and he quickly learns that in this universe, his uncle's actually alive. And although he's still confused and cautious, you can see the sense of relief he gets when he gets to hug him again. But Miguel's warning comes to fruition. When confronted by the Prowler, Miles is shocked to learn that it's his alternate self that ends up taking on the mantle from his uncle, leading him down a life of crime. The ending of the movie is a perfect way to add some nuance to this whole video. Miles from Earth 42 still experiences loss through the passing of his father in that universe. But rather than rising from the ashes, he actually gets consumed by the darkness. It serves as yet another reminder that although tragedy can be more beneficial than people like to admit, it still is dangerous and can lead someone down the wrong path. Obviously, there's so many variables here that might affect this, but one thing remains constant. It presents a choice. Heal and continue upwards, or don't and get consumed by your sorrows. If you made it to the end of the video, I would really appreciate it if you could go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe for more videos like this. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about Miguel's motivation. And while you're here, I'd also recommend you check out this video I made a couple months ago on ego, something that we as a society have also automatically categorized as a negative trait, when in reality that's not exactly true. Anyways, with all that said, thanks for watching and continue making the right choice.